Sully is most definitely one of the most complex characters in the entirety of Top Boy. Making up one half of the leads, he couldn't be more different to his counterpart Dushane. With a troubling backstory, a turbulent life, and a demise which we could foresee all of those years ago, I thought I'd take a look inside of the mind of Sully and break down why he is the way that he is in the modern day. So let's get into it. Here is Sully's broken mind analysed. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Sully's upbringing and the impact on his life. It's been said that our early life acts as our formative years, and it's extremely important when it comes to impacting who we eventually go on to become later on in life. Sully's early life and family life is something that's never really touched upon in the show that much, which implies that it wasn't necessarily the happiest of times due to the way that there's nobody other than his cousins which are remotely present. You could also argue that the way that he saw Jason being treated by his mother, neglecting him, could have been triggered from maybe having a similar experience, hence why it stuck with him, and why he ultimately ended up taking Jason in under his wing. We know that Sully and Dushane were like brothers from an early age, and we even heard Sully express his closeness to Dushane's mother when she was on her deathbed, sharing about how he would come over for meals and enjoy the time together. So it most definitely shows that he almost viewed Dushane and his family as his own. There was a closer bond there, and that was something that also carried through to later on in life. When we look at how his upbringing could have affected him, if Sully was an individual like Jason, where he almost had to fend for himself because either his parents weren't around or they didn't have the financial stability, I feel we would have seen him exhibit similar behaviors to Jason when he was younger, allowing him to learn skills which made him hold his own and grow in confidence, which is something which most probably ties into why he's so successful on what it is that he does in the present day. Because if he wants something, he just goes out and gets it, such as turning Dushane over like the way that he did. As well as that, the stone cold attitude that Sully has could also come from his childhood too. If there wasn't much love, affection, or care, then Sully wouldn't know how to express those emotions or how to receive them either. Hence why we never really saw him in a relationship. He struggled being around his daughter Tash to start with and is almost numb to the world, but that's something that comes later on down the line too. There is one arm to Sully's mind where he does show a sense of compassion and aid, and it's often to those in need. For example, when he chose to stick by Jason after several years and be his friend, and also in the scene where we saw him feeding the hungry fox by the canal, something which I think is symbolic of his internal feelings and understanding of how it felt to be in that position. The inferiority complex. Sully has a massive inferiority complex in his life, and this is something that's most prominently seen with his relationship and partnership with Dushane. Dushane was the leader of both of them, and he ran Summer House for a long time with Sully by his side, and I'm putting emphasis on by his side. Sully would always find a way to mess things up in some capacity whilst looking to be top dog or trying to prove his worth to Dushane, something he never actually needed to do, but felt he had to. For example, back in Summer House, he killed Sean by accident, which marked his first kill, landing the both of them in trouble. He kidnapped his cousin when he was on his own and found himself in a situation where he was almost killed. And he also tried to approach a rival crew and ended up being held hostage, ultimately resulting with Dushane being the individual who got him out of all of these situations time and time again. Whilst it's something that Sully appreciated at the time, it's definitely something which piece by piece weighed more and more heavily on top of Sully's mind, and the inferior nature that he felt was probably becoming more and more prominent. Hence why he ultimately did what he did in the final season by screwing Dushane over and ultimately becoming Top Boy. When we go back to the early part of the true season 3, just after Sully got out of prison, we saw that one of the first things that he said to Dushane when he knocked on the door, reunited with him and agreed to work with him was, "I'm no less than you," showing that even back then he had the fear in his mind that he'd be viewed as weak alongside Dushane, and it was something that he just didn't want in the slightest. We must remember as well, as Dushane was dying due to Sully firing at him, he said the line, "I just wanted your respect," something which he felt as though he never had from him, showing us that from day dot when the show first opened, it's all he ever wanted, and despite Dushane actually giving it to him, he just didn't know how to receive it. So he was set in his own mind thinking that he was inferior, so he chose to believe himself when it wasn't even real. The numbness to it all. One key element to Sully's personality and the mindset that he holds is the numbness to the reality of the world that he lives in. We saw Sully before he became a murderer, and we saw him after being a killer and being involved in multiple. So we've seen the direct transformation and why it is that he became numb to the world. I wouldn't say that Sully just killing is what made him numb to the world and exposed him to the harsh reality of the life that he was leading and the work that he was doing. But I think it was him having to deal with people that he cared about, and then losing people that he loved and cared for, which made him feel it too. For example, when he killed Dris, that was something which it was clear to see weighed heavily on his mind and impacted him on a personal level. He didn't want to do it, but it was something that he knew that he needed to do. Not only was he exposed to killing somebody that he cared about, but he was also exposed to being betrayed by a brother, somebody that he thought that he could trust. So two harsh facts hit him at once. However, just before that, there was one moment which I think started the process of numbing Sully, and that was the death of innocent Jason. As I mentioned earlier, I think Sully saw a lot of himself in Jason, hence why he took him in under his wing and became like an older brother to him. So when Jason was killed in the fire, it was clear to see that Sully changed that evening. They had plans together to do things such as going to watch Arsenal and getting a place and living with one another, but all of that was turned upside down in the space of a few hours, numbing Sully from feeling anything else after that day. We've never seen Sully express emotion like what happened with Jason, other than one other time, the ending. We didn't even see it when he was getting himself beaten whilst being held hostage, so this showed the impact that it had on him and that nothing would ever hurt him as much as what happened with Jason. That was until his daughter came back into the equation, but she was never put in jeopardy, so we didn't really see how he'd act towards that, only aggression when there were threats. So the reason Sully was numb and why we saw that he was just willing to let Stefan kill him where he stood in the park was because he didn't feel anything anymore, and he hadn't for a long time. After witnessing so many deaths such as Dushane, Dris, and Jason, and feeling like he's being targeted at any given moment and having to avoid the authorities at all times, numbness is the only option that he allowed, because if he didn't, then he most likely wouldn't be able to live with himself or be able to survive. It would just eat him up inside. The destiny of failure due to his emotions. Sully being top boy was something that was always going to end in failure. Based on his track record alone, it was something that was always painted in the stars. In the second season of Summer House, we saw that he tried going on his own, and it ultimately resulted in failure when he took his cousin Jermaine and Dushane had to save the day. So the rather poetic thing about Sully's demise is that only once Dushane was dead and gone was it that he died too. Because deep down, Sully needed Dushane far more than Dushane ever needed Sully. When Dushane acted like Sully in the final season of the show and acted on emotions instead of being the logical thinker that he was before. For example, when he killed Jeffrey in a fit of rage, it was what ultimately contributed to his demise. So with Sully acting the way that he does, based on emotions most of the time, it was never set to last, and with no Dushane being there to bail him out when he got into trouble again, it was always going to end badly for Sully. Sully is such an interesting character in the show, and it's been a pleasure to watch him develop over the years. Kano gave us an extremely complex, interesting, and emotionally stunted individual that many of us came to get enjoyment out of seeing what he got up to and how his journey ultimately ended. He died a monster, just as he knew that he would. So, there you have it, Sully's broken mind analysed. Would you like to see more characters' minds delved into from the show Top Boy? Leave a comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.